Now, this is how you kick off a new season. I can't say I'm understanding why the episodes are laid out the way they are just yet, given a logistical confusion of Ben name dropping Ghost Freak in the penultimate episode of last season, after the character was already removed from the watch, but I'm gonna assume we'll get there.
Who's the dumbass?
Whoa! Hey, how about a little professional courtesy here?
What's that, dumbass?
Say it again.
You want me to?
I dare you.
Dumbass.
We take a step into the future to support the past with a lot of setup coming from the back of this one, and I don't believe what is done with this later on was intended at the time, but they make it work.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
There are an abundance of hints, clues, nods and call forwards established here that this is less likely to be a review and more of a breakdown, but as I've said, we'll see how this goes.
You've got to learn to go limp, loosey-goosey, shake it all up.
We start this delightful adventure by settling down next to a lake as Ben and Gwen prepare to surprise Max for his 60th birthday. When as they're bickering over their respective responsibilities towards this, a portal opens next to them with a woman gliding out through it, later revealed to be a future Gwen, snatching her younger self and luring Ben away as Accelerate to retrieve her. Following the intro, we catch up with Gwen as she arrives in a futuristic city and is rescued by Accelerate, who briefly knocks out the captor. As they take a second to recover, it steadily dawns on them that they're in the future, upon seeing a statue dedicated to Ben 10,000, Hero of Heroes. Where before Ben's ego begins to inflate that head of his, Spider-Man villain the Rhino makes a cameo here, tearing down the statue and is ready to wipe Ben out, who frustratingly times out but is saved when another Accelerate steps in and it's revealed to be Ben's future self.
I'm seeing double here.
Once the fight is done, future Ben takes off, leaving a future Gwendolyn to deal with the aftermath when both her and her younger self and Ben are escorted to a future Ben's headquarters by an 80-year-old Grandpa Max. They are alerted to an attack below the headquarters where it's revealed that Dr. Animal has returned and is seeking something within the base.
Oh great, it's Liv.
Future Ben wipes the floor with Animal for now and is joined by his younger self and Gwendolyn during the battle, and then by the Galactic Enforcers, who he berates for being ultimately useless, and who Animal is able to overcome later on without any struggle.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
After this, future Ben picks up Ben and Gwen and runs them back to the top of his headquarters, where younger Ben starts to pry into his future and steadily pisses himself off.
What? I'm not Peter. Stop arguing, both of you!
Where, as they're about to butt heads, future Ben is forced to deal with a disruption below decks where Dr. Animal has escaped again and attempting to open a larger null void projector.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
As both Bens go to confront him, they're both stopped by a resurrected Vilgax.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Who was seemingly killed from a brutal encounter against Ben many years ago. And Animal gave dear Villy the advantage here by resurrecting him with all of Ben's transformations and skills encoded within him, allowing Villy to counter every single one of Ben's attacks. As things begin to break down, both Gwen's and Max unite to take down Animal and stop anything escaping the Null Void, whilst the Bens team up and confront Vilgax in the city streets. Which seems like a losing battle for a moment until younger Ben convinces himself to take on Vilgax as his true form, being the only transformation he wouldn't know how to combat against. Future Ben goes along with this and manipulates his younger self's watch to assist more efficiently, and they lure Vilgax into a nearby lake and freeze him inside using a new transformation to both us and younger Ben that he aptly names Arctaguana. And once the matter is resolved, we close on Gwendolyn and future Ben surprising Max with a birthday celebration for his 80th, whilst Gwen and Ben are transported back to their own time, with a cake in tow that Ben forgot to get at the beginning of the episode to wish Max a happy 60th. So there's a lot to discuss and take in here, so we'll start with the glaring aspect of this episode, and that is this future isn't canon to our Ben.
Fantastic. This was a huge waste of my time.
It's established in an excellently written episode of Ultimate Alien titled Ben 10,000 Returns, which also ties into the events of a Race Against Time movie that comes out shortly after the series, with the antagonist of that movie returning and establishing a sort of Ben 10 multiverse in that episode, that this future Ben is just a possible future for our Ben, but alas is not the one that we follow. It gets a little bit confusing, but the writers work to restructure the timeline as the seasons go by as best they can, and most of the heavy lifting begins begins with a character named Professor Paradox in Alien Force, but as the man would say, that's a story for another time, my friends. The story here though, had they chosen to follow through with it, would have been an excellent stake to Ben's character to pursue, as this more stoic, jaded and acrimonious old fool who started to forget himself and his family, to the point of alienating his own grandfather, someone who he's always heralded as an inspiration for his own motivations and actions, and we'll go on to see in the spin-offs becomes a large source of support for Ben. So it would have been a fascinating way to take this, but I do also appreciate the restraint and clever subversion that this was for just being one possible future to Ben. But what we do know is that for however much this story isn't canon to our Ben's future, what we witness play out here is still canon to the future Ben's trajectory, referenced in the episode Ben 10,000 Returns as being a memory for both him and our Ben. So it's not a pointless watch with this one, but I can understand if you feel slighted from seeing what could have been for our young protagonist. But this one is just one of those where at the time we thought this was it, and even with the future we know Ben goes on to have, it would have been pretty cool to see this one play out and understand what turns him. My theory, at least for Ben's attitude and demeanour here, is possibly the fight with Vilgax that left him in the condition we found him in, which is also another battle I'd love to fucking see. But that can't be true either, as they give Vilgax a complete redesign both narratively and stylistically going forward, which I can't say I'm a huge fan of, but at least that's a fair confirmation that this version of events doesn't exist. The last note for this is we do return to this Ben next season for an episode that will see what becomes of his other greatest adversary in the weaker of the two future episodes for me, but it provides the audiences with some closure as to the legacy of Ben 10. There's a mysticism to stories like these where you jump ahead or visit another version of that character and you're left with so many questions about what transpired to make that world and them the way they are. It's why, for now at least, the multiverse is the latest hot topic for exploration in cinema. Everyone's curious about what could have been and still could be. And obviously not as dark, but this reminds me of the arc in TMNT 2003 that sees the Turtles split off into various dimensions and timelines at the hands of their enemy, with Donatello being projected into a dystopian hellscape and possible future where after an all-out war between the Hamatos and the Orokus, the Turtles disbanded, Casey, Donnie and Splinter died, and the Shredder took over the world. This isn't anywhere near as dark as what we receive here, but the possibilities are always endless, and that tale is exactly the type of stuff I love to see and get a deeper idea of when exploring different dimensions and timelines, just like with Ben. And to round out the genuinely mind-blowing elements from this, we have to take a second and remind ourselves of the new aliens. I can't recall if we ever see these designs again, but Arctiguana, Buzzshock and Spitter were fucking awesome. There's a lot of creativity put into Ben's transformations, with some being incredible to some good to some mind-numbingly fucking stupid.
It's funny because it's true.
But at the end of the day, the imagination of the artists and designers for the series were otherworldly, and injections like this help to renew the show occasionally and prevent it from stagnating, likely why Ben receives a couple of upgrades himself this season too.
Look at the shiny.
I did see a few people critical of this concept, feeling it removes the believability of the show, but I personally don't think it removes anything from the title of Ben 10, especially as this version of Ben's season received 9,988 DLC bonuses in a non-existent timeline. But if anything, it helps to pack out the world building and provides the audience with a sense of scale to how many different species there are in this universe.
That's so fucking many.
Now, I could prattle on for days about this episode, but for the sake of time and my sanity, I'm going to wrap it up here. The inclusion of Vilgax, I mentioned 2 weeks back, feels a little cheap considering we just said goodbye to the character for now within our current day timeline chronologically, but it's still a joy to see him go toe to toe against Ben, and particularly a fleshed out hardened hero who's taken no shit from anyone. Animo is always a wasted inclusion, as he could have been a genuine threat, but that's not what he's designed for. The futuristic landscape felt fairly grounded and was comprised of everything you thought we'd at least have by now, until we saw the tower, that is, with possibly the most shameless and pompous self-promoting I've ever seen. Futuristic plots or time travel stories in a show that allows for that to be worked in are always going to feel a little oversaturated as a concept, but at this point it's about how you leave them and what distinctions they hold. Ben's agency here takes great effect for later on in the franchise, and I'm grateful the writers were able to rework a lot of this to produce the arc we're witnessing Ben undergo. Gwendolyn is possibly the perfect outcome for our young lass compared to what we get in the Omniverse, but you win some, you lose some. And I love the message this gives younger viewers about responsibility for your role in life as much as your family and respect for your elders. And that leaves me to say that this was a delightful watch with a breezy pace, subtle subtext, informational writing, and packed with more action than we've had for some time. In short, this episode is incredible, and I would firmly recommend that you go out your way to check it out. That's going to do it from me for this week though, everybody. Please be sure to leave a like on this if you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell to be notified of anything I do in the future. And until next time everyone, take care, and I will see you soon.